A Florida family is suing LA Fitness after a man was seen on camera stalking their teen daughter at a Miami gym, eventually cornering her and touching her inappropriately. He pled guilty to a felony battery charge, and now her family says it's time to hold the gym accountable. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. A 14-year-old girl's workout at a Miami-Dade County gym essentially turned into an alleged nightmare back in 2023, and her family now wants LA Fitness to pay up millions of dollars to compensate her for psychological trauma. This teen was apparently accosted in a workout area that allegedly wasn't well supervised by gym staff or even had surveillance cameras, and according to a new lawsuit, that particular gym knew that the suspect, Richard Bosch, was trouble. That's the allegation. And apparently, they say, the gym didn't limit his access to the facility. So we're going to take you through the surveillance footage from that day, as well as the legal repercussions that Bosch has already faced and the lawsuit filed by the victim's family. So to do that, I want to bring in civil trial attorney David Ring, who specializes in sexual abuse cases. David, thanks so much for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, I want to start off with what attorneys for the victim's family laid out at the beginning of their complaint, and that's what we're going to start with. We'll talk about it. It was filed, by the way, at the end of May, so almost 2 years to the day since the assault. It says, quote, on May 30th, 2023, while working out in an LA Fitness gym in Miami, Florida, 14-year-old KB became the victim of a heinous sexual assault and battery. Another gym member, Richard Bosch, who was 22 years old at the time and known to LA Fitness for his prior violent and erratic behavior at the gym, stalked KB as she was exercising, approached her several times to ask her, among other things, how old she was, whether she had ever tapped out during sex, whether she was a virgin, and whether she had ever been with an older man. And he promptly cornered her, groped her genital area and buttocks in multiple locations throughout the gym, including the isolated boxing room that lacked a functioning security camera. KB has since suffered severe and lasting psychological trauma requiring extensive psychiatric treatment. Accordingly, this action seeks damages for KB's injuries in excess of $5 million, exclusive of costs, attorney's fees, and interest. A lot to unpack there. We're going to go through it all. But first, David, I have to ask you, when you see a lawsuit like this, how do you calculate a potential $5 million damages tag like that?
Well, so look, you can put any amount you want in a lawsuit, and I know the media loves to report the amounts that are placed in a lawsuit, but they're really a bit meaningless. I mean, what really has to happen is after discovery is done, the lawsuit's gone on for a year or so, it really comes down to what is the actual damage to the victim. And look, in this case, I mean, it very well may be a $5 million case. That's really horrific conduct here. But it comes down to their treatment and their emotional harm and their physical damages.
Is it tough, by the way, for a point of law to, we talk about causation in the law. Is it tough to say, because of this episode, this is what I've suffered? Because of this episode, this is now my psychological trauma as evidence, whether it's my conversations with a psychiatrist or if I've had to seek medical treatment or anything like that. Is it tough to make that causal connection?
Sometimes it can be, but in a case like this, you have a very young victim. She's 14 years old. She probably has no other trauma in her life up to this point. So it's going to be a really clear line from the harm she's suffered to this incident. She's not going to have a lot of other things in her life that could contribute to her emotional harm or her psychological distress. But in other cases, sure. I mean, people have all sorts of traumatic events in their lives, and they can be contributing factors as well.
Talking a lawsuit like this, how could I not bring up experts in the litigation field? Our great partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. This is America's largest injury firm, and honestly, they have an amazing track record. In the past few months, Morgan & Morgan secured a $9.3 million verdict for a car crash victim in Florida, a $5.6 million verdict for another car accident victim in Atlanta, and not to mention $1.8 million in Kentucky after insurance offered them a mere $5,000 in that case. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not just start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan, they make it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. Everything from signing contracts to uploading documents to talking to your legal team, it can all be done through the phone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. So let's talk about it. According to this lawsuit, the victim is first allegedly attacked in a secluded room referred to in the complaint as the boxing room. And the lawsuit claims that the security camera in that room wasn't working. The complaint states defendant Bosch refused to leave KB alone. He followed KB over to the other side of the back boxing room and stood behind her facing the mirror as he proceeded to lift up his shirt and pull down his pants just above his pubic area to show KB that he had an erection. And the victim reportedly yelled, "What are you doing?" but says Bosch was unfazed, continued to make comments about her body, and she claims he groped her backside as she tried to leave. The lawsuit continues. KB immediately turned around and attempted to free herself from defendant Bosch, but defendant Bosch forcibly cornered KB up against the wall and proceeded to grab her by the inner thighs near her genital area and lift her up onto the wall. KB screamed, but defendant Bosch continued to pin KB up against the wall for what felt like an eternity as he continued to grope her. When defendant Bosch finally put KB down after groping her, he asked her why she was playing so hard to get. In utter fear for her safety, KB tried to push defendant Bosch off of her and run out of the boxing room, but defendant Bosch kicked KB in an attempt to prevent her from leaving the secluded room. Now, David, let's stop there. We're not talking about a quick touch, right? We're talking about a victim who claims that this man physically picked her up and pinned her against the wall in a gym, a public area. We'll talk about the public nature of it. What does that kind of brazen behavior say to you? I'm sure you've seen episodes like this in a public area, right?
I have. And so, I mean, look, this Bosch, this defendant here, obviously incredibly erratic person. You're going to see that on the surveillance video or the security cameras. But this went on for too long. This is not an isolated 5-second gropes her, and the gym would be like, hey, how could we possibly prevent that? That happened within a matter of seconds. That is not the case here, at least according to the allegations. The case here is that he's stalking her around this gym. He's following her. He's going into rooms where no one else is there and there's no security camera. This all sounds very bad for LA Fitness, and the worst thing is this is a 14-year-old girl. This is someone who deserves protection. She's welcome there to come work out, use their facilities, and the gym did not do enough to protect these young people working out at their facility.
I wonder from a legal point of view, could the lack of camera work both for the defense and a plaintiff in a case? What do I mean by that? So if you have, or in a criminal case, right? A defendant victim. So or defendant prosecution. So you have one side saying he knew there wasn't a camera there, right? He knew what he was doing. The defense could say, how convenient, a camera wasn't there in that specific place. How do you think that would work in a court of law?
I agree. Both arguments can be made. I think in this particular case, it's going to harm LA Fitness that they do not have a camera in there. And it's going to harm this defendant Bosch because, look, this 14-year-old girl, she's going to be credible. She's going to be believable. Why would she ever make anything up like this? And we have other video footage that we do see him doing these things to her. So there's no reason to believe he did not do it in the boxing area where there was no camera. There should have been a camera there.
So let's talk about it. When he apparently went to a main or more main part of the gym, there was surveillance camera that was working, okay? So that's Richard Bosch in the green shirt, tan pants, walking into an area of the gym that has weights and stair climbing machines. And then you see this 14-year-old victim who's blurred out come from the same direction a few moments later. They both walk back into frame, with Bosch apparently trying to make conversation with the victim. Bosch eventually walks back out of view of the security camera, but a couple minutes later, he's back, carrying a bag. He starts walking to another man working out, and you can see the victim in the mirror standing off to the side against a wall, seemingly typing on her cell phone. So Bosch chats with friends for a bit and then takes off his shirt, checks himself out in the mirror, and at one point he gestures toward the victim who's still standing by the wall, but the man he's talking to doesn't seem to notice. So the victim eventually leaves the area when Bosch starts talking to another friend. She's gone for around about 4 minutes, and when she comes back, that is when things take a very dark turn, because in the surveillance video, you can see Bosch notice her immediately, then corner her in that small alcove area. The reflection in the mirror shows what's going on in that tiny corner. And you can see the victim try to push him away multiple times, but he presses his body up against hers. So David, one of the things, again, that's so disturbing here, there are other people around. This isn't happening in an empty area of the gym, in like a hotel gym at 6 in the morning or something like that. People are walking around, they're using the machines. No one steps in, no one says anything. It's not until someone walks right past them that he breaks away from her. How is this possible?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I observed the exact same thing, Jesse, when I was watching the surveillance videos, that there's other people nearby working out, and they seem to either not be paying attention or disinterested. And hey, I get it. You know, you're in a gym, you might have your AirPods in your ear, you're listening, you're focused on something else. You don't necessarily look over and see this, but boy, there's a couple people that were close by that you would expect to have seen something and would have stepped in. It's pretty unusual.
It is unusual, it is distressing, it is disturbing. The victim then tries to get away from Bosch by getting onto a stair climber, but he follows her, leaning against the front of the machine. He looks frustrated, at one point even throwing something at her, possibly a plastic water bottle. So a few minutes later, Bosch has taken off his shirt again, is working out. The victim gets off the stair climber, has to walk past Bosch to leave, and he aggressively throws the weight that he's holding to the ground and gets up, continuing to try to talk to her as she walks past, and at one point appearing to shout at her. The victim walks through the area one more time and encounters Bosch again, but their interaction is off camera. And then about a minute later, he reappears, talking on the phone, grabs his bag, leaves. According to the lawsuit, quote, relentless in his pursuit of KB, defendant Bosch followed KB from the women's locker room out to the main area of the subject gym, where he belligerently and repeatedly called out her name. In doing so, defendant Bosch then attempted to grab KB's arm to prevent her from leaving the subject gym, at which point KB screamed, "Leave me alone," before exiting the subject gym. Talk about his culpability. Again, you got to think about LA Fitness here as we talk about this.
You know, his conduct is so erratic when you watch this video. There's so many things he does that should have drawn the attention of LA Fitness employees. You know, just the fact he's got his shirt off and he takes his shirt off and he's working out for several minutes. Yeah, I don't know the gyms you go to, but the ones I go to, you know, people don't take their shirts off. And that's just bizarre. And you can just tell this guy's acting bizarrely, aggressively. I think I even saw him use a vape at some point on this surveillance videotape. And then obviously the confrontations he's having with this 14-year-old girl should have raised alarms to either the people there in the gym or to the staff who should have been monitoring this video camera and should have seen some of this and come over there and intervened much sooner than they ever did.
And the lawsuit says that she called her dad, crying hysterically. He comes to the gym. The police were gone. Police did speak to witnesses at the gym, one of whom said he saw some of Bosch's odd behavior, questioned Bosch about his relationship to the victim, and Bosch reportedly told him that she was his sister, and then changed his story and said it was his cousin. So, David, it does seem that someone knew something was up.
Yeah, it sure does seem that way. And look, one thing we haven't discussed, I'm sure we'll get there, is there's been prior complaints about Bosch at this gym acting aggressively, confronting some of the people working out there, and the gym knew it. And yet he was still allowed to come back into this gym and work out. So if all of that is true, and again, it's just a lawsuit with allegations in it, but it sure sounds like there's some truth to all of this that, you know, again, LA Fitness clearly dropped the ball by allowing this to happen.
And let's talk about what happened. So Bosch was arrested for lewd and lascivious molestation of a child between the ages of 12 and 16 years, eventually entered a guilty plea to one count of battery as part of a plea deal with prosecutors. He was given 4 years probation in December of 2023, but he was arrested again in February of this year for criminal mischief, which meant he violated his probation. He was reportedly caught breaking into and vandalizing multiple cars, according to court records. He's scheduled to go to trial on those criminal mischief charges in August. David, seems like it wasn't the right punishment. If he gets caught up doing something again, I mean, probation?
Yeah, I'm shocked that here you have this on video. It's a 14-year-old girl. She doesn't know this guy, and he sexually assaults her on camera. There's no doubt it happened, and he gets probation. I mean, that's very surprising, and you know, again, is predictable. He's on probation. He's the type of guy he's gonna commit another crime, and he did, predictably.
So what about the claim that LA Fitness was negligent? We've been talking about it a little bit, so let's get into it a little bit more. Here's what the lawsuit has to say. Quote, unfortunately, defendant Bosch's sexual assault on KB was not surprising. Witness statements obtained shortly after the incident occurred confirm that defendant LA Fitness knew defendant Bosch to be a violent and dangerous man based on a prior incident weeks before where defendant Bosch came into the gym belligerent, asking people to fight him, and the fact that defendant Bosch had previously received a warning by the gym for similar conduct. But despite defendant LA Fitness's knowledge of defendant Bosch's prior aggressive conduct and his dangerous propensities towards other gym members, defendant LA Fitness failed to revoke his membership or restrict his access to the subject gym in any way. Making matters worse, defendant LA Fitness's own employees, agents, and/or representatives did nothing to prevent this traumatic incident from occurring despite observing defendant Bosch attempting to prey on KB before he ultimately assaulted her in the subject gym's isolated boxing room. To be sure, one of the witnesses whom police officers interviewed after the assault advised that he worked at the LA Fitness and stated to officers that after someone came up to him and told him that Bosch was following KB around, he noticed that Bosch was in fact continually following KB around the gym. David, if all of this is true, what's the defense from LA Fitness?
They need to settle the case. That's what they need to do. I mean, the two things that jump out at me from what you just read from the lawsuit is what we call notice, meaning did the LA Fitness have notice or knowledge in advance that this guy Bosch was a potential danger? It sure sounds like they did. He's confrontational with other customers there in the weeks leading up to this. He's given a warning that his behavior is unacceptable and he's still allowed to work out there. That's what we call notice. And it's really important to have that to win one of these cases. The other part of it that jumps out at me is when this is happening on this day with this young girl, LA Fitness employees observe his conduct towards her. They see him following her around and they think it's unusual, and yet they don't intervene. That in and of itself is going to be negligence. And so the plaintiffs here, this victim and her lawyers, they have two really, really solid theories to pursue to win this case.
Do they have a duty to protect? I mean, in the sense, if they didn't revoke his membership, do they have a duty to watch him, to have somebody always following him as he does his workouts, to constantly watching him on surveillance? What is that duty to protect other patrons from him?
They have to act reasonably, okay? And they know they have minors working out at this gym. They allow minors to work out there. So they have to act reasonably. And so, no, they don't have to follow him around, every step he takes. They don't have to have him on surveillance footage and follow him everywhere he goes. But what they have to do is act reasonably. And if they had all of these prior complaints about him acting aggressively and trying to pick fights, that's enough to get you kicked out of a gym. That should be enough, or at least to have your membership severely restricted for a while. And yeah, you should keep a close eye on him when he returns to make sure he's changed his ways. I don't think they did that. And then the other thing is, when they see him on this particular day following this girl around, the employees should know this is a guy who's gotten in trouble here in the past. We're going to keep a close eye on him. And when he's doing something unusual like this, that's it. We're stepping in and putting an end to it.
Yeah, and because especially if we're talking negligence, right, the victim's parents, they're filing this lawsuit on behalf of their daughter. She's 16 now. They're suing Fitness International LLC for negligence. So foreseeability is a big element of that, and I think they can have an argument there. They're also suing Richard Bosch for assault and battery. I understand going after the company, right? You're going after them. They have a responsibility. Also, from a damages point of view, you can recover quite significantly from Fitness International LLC. Why sue Richard Bosch? I mean, what can you get for Richard Bosch from a damages perspective?
Probably next to nothing or nothing, but there's some strategic reasons for adding the perpetrator to the civil lawsuit. Sometimes jurors are like, wait, why are you suing LA Fitness? And you didn't even name the assailant as a perpetrator. So that's one reason, just the looks of it. But two, you also gain control over him in the civil lawsuit. It allows you to conduct discovery against him, to take his testimony. It allows you to do a lot of things in a lawsuit that you would not be able to do if he was not named as a defendant. So there's some key strategy reasons for naming him.
When reached by NBC6 in Florida, attorneys for LA Fitness, they said they couldn't comment on pending litigation. Not surprising there. But you mentioned if they settle, right? They might want to settle this. If you're representing LA Fitness, what do you advise them to do? And do you put out a statement afterwards? Do they settle? Do they fire all the employees in that particular location? Do they change corporate policy? What does LA Fitness do?
Well, look, unfortunately, a lot of settlements, when they are reached, remain confidential. A lot of civil lawsuits, they go through this phase. It's called discovery, where you exchange information, you take testimony, you learn exactly what the facts are. All of that is done outside of the courtroom. It's not public knowledge. It's all done in offices and conference rooms. And then, LA Fitness sees, hey, we're going to lose this case if it goes to trial. And that's typically when they would reach a settlement. And a lot of times these settlements are confidential. And so we may never hear anything more of it other than, hey, the case ended in a settlement. And we may never know what else happens. But here's the thing. If LA Fitness or any other gym is a responsible employer, they will make changes because of the lawsuit. They will train their employees. They will have security cameras installed in every room. And they'll do what they can to make sure it doesn't happen again. And hopefully they do that if they end up losing this case.
David Ring, this is an interesting one. This is a disturbing one. And the surveillance footage is what, piques a lot of people's interest. But I tell you, from a legal point of view, so important in this case. David, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Thank you, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.